of our problems. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick.
Podcast. Yeah. Hey, I mean, nothing like a few little miracles, like just having things work the way they're supposed to, right?
But it's one of those things where we're smoking cigars, we're enjoying each other's company. Nothing can go wrong. Even the technical hiccups doesn't matter. All is well. Good
Lord. Well, listen, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. Let me attempt to introduce you guys. So, Josh Habursky, you are Deputy Executive Director and Head of Government Affairs for the Premium Cigar Association. This is how we met. In addition to that, because that clearly isn't enough of a full-time job for you, you're adjunct professor at George Washington University Graduate School of Political Affairs. You're also a contributing editor to countless media outlets. I couldn't even begin to name them all. And on top of it, your day job is personal for you because you're also the owner of Embassy Cigar Lounge.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride. I think with the cigar world, I've been all in on it since I started with PCA, or it used to be IPCPR, before the name change. And I'm a retailer. We represent brick-and-mortar retailers and cigar lounges, cigar bars around the country, 3,000 plus members. And the lounge in Quantico, right near the Marine Corps base. I'm a partner in that, and soon to be a partner in a cigar lounge in Erie, Pennsylvania, my hometown, that we're building from scratch. And it's got a historical theme to it called the Brig, after the Brig Niagara. And yes, we have cannons. I'm also a big firearms enthusiast and a bourbon enthusiast. So this is like the perfect podcast for me and the work that you're doing.
You're part of the family. And in your right hand, who is State Advocacy Director, is Glynn Loope.
Hello there, Glynn Loope here. Great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us, sir.
Glenn's the elder statesman of the department. He's with a wealth of knowledge. Been 15 years in the cigar industry?
Well,
if there was a Mount Rushmore of cigar advocacy and lobbying, you would see Glenn's lovely face there.
Oh, God. See, Josh said he was a bourbon enthusiast, which means he's been drinking already.
No.
Let me put it this way. The only part of that I'll embrace is the elder statesman part, because literally my first position out of college was working for the Virginia legislature before Josh was born.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah. Well, it's good that he has you around to keep him in line.
We keep each other in line.
We got a great team. We have fun with it. In addition to a lot of hard work, there's a lot of challenges, which I'm sure we'll get into. But Glynn has been a pillar. We could not have found a better fit for the organization and state advocacy. But we're a very we're a unit. We have one other person on our team in-house, Ryan Parada, and we don't look at it like divisions. It's a 3-person unit, and we have 30,000 bills we have to track between the state and federal every year, and
wow.
It's an all hands-on team approach. There's all the glory and all the problems are shared.
Yeah. Well, listen, before we get into the meat of things, and there's a lot to talk about and a lot going on, I always kind of start off on the lighter side of things. And it's kind of why we started the publication, and it's why these 3 things, at least to most people, end up being so meaningful. So I'll start off with some easy questions. Josh, do you remember your first cigar?
I do. It was in college. I was part of the Winston Churchill Society. I originally thought I was going to be a history professor, which I had a really good political science professor, Dr. Joseph DeSaro, who I'm still very close friends with. He was the person that kind of got me into both politics and cigars. And we had, we met every week. We talked about the political issues, really switched into political history, but wanted to learn the actual ins and outs of it before I would, become a political science professor. And, he had a cruise, and it was known as the booze cruise during intersession, where you drank tequila and smoked cigars in addition to studying Mexican and Caribbean politics. And that was what really cemented it for me of like, this is what I want to do. I'm interested in all of these issue areas. And, now I'm blessed to have my dream job where I get to teach on the side, but also represent an incredible industry.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you remember what this cigar was?
Oh, there were a few. I mean, I do remember, a mint Java as being one of my first ones. Also, the Rocky Patel, I think it was 1990. Rocky Patel had burned. I went to college just outside of Pittsburgh. That was the Leaf and Bean, Jernigan's, and Burn were really the places that I got into cigars and, learned the differences between, what is sold in a premium cigar lounge and a convenience store or gas station, and, developed a palate, but that was, you learn something when you go to a cigar lounge every day, or you learn something each time you go there. And my palate has kind of evolved. And now, I'll smoke the Rocky Patel 60 and the ALR. I really don't smoke flavored cigars anymore.
Right. So what do you remember your first drink of alcohol?
Oh, yeah, it was Bombay Sapphire gin, believe it or not.
Wow.
God, he started at the top, didn't he? He didn't mess around, did he?
We drank that in college. That was the drink of choice. When I worked political campaigns, a lot of us would get the Vlad vodka, which was like $9 a bottle. And the funny story is, it's both were around the same time. We had the real nice stuff, and then we had the crap that we would drink just to let loose. But the vodka was so bad, we would put it through a Brita filter 3 times to make it better, and it was still terrible. So I don't drink Vlad anymore, but Glynn and I shared a few Bombay Sapphire martinis at the mayor's restaurant in Vegas, Oscar's Steakhouse, which if you're ever in Vegas, that is an essential place to go to.
Right. That's amazing. All right. And then obviously the last question is, do you remember the first time you shot a firearm?
Whew. Yeah. Funny, it was black powder. It was a black powder rifle. When I was in high school going into college, I was into war reenacting. And I did the Civil War reenacting for a while, but mainly French and Indian War. And the first one that I shot was actually a 58 caliber replica Enfield rifle, and we melted our own bullets out of toilet parts in order to fire them. So they lead balls, we melted them, there was an event, and then we shot them. So kind of a cool story.
That's fantastic. Well, yeah, we start out, every podcast with, those questions, and it's very, very rare that people don't immediately smile when they hear those questions and then immediately jump back into, these kind of, milestone moments in their lives, right? Because, there's just something about these things that, they're memorable events. I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, but I vividly remember, the first time I experienced these things. And, I don't know if it was because, some people describe it as, growing up as a child, you kind of look at, your grown up heroes, doing these adult things that are kind of forbidden to kids, right? Drinking and smoking and shooting guns. It's like, no, that's adult stuff. And so the first time that you get to partake it feels like that transition into being
Rite of
an
passage.
adult, right? And and everybody always seems to vividly remember it, even if, like I said, I can't remember what I had for dinner, but but I always remember those things. So that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. And what's especially cool, and I guess I'll provide some context, because I don't know that you're our typical guest on the podcast, but here's why I was so excited when I met you and why I wanted to have you guys on is, in all three of these areas, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, what this magazine is for is really what we call, it's an American lifestyle publication. It's about people that share this common interest and love in America and the freedoms that we have. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, while this is by no means a political publication, we don't get into the political debate. But what we do believe in is a celebration of our freedoms and the rights that we have as Americans to celebrate those freedoms. And there aren't many industries that have dedicated bureaus, in some cases fighting against those industries, right? So as I say to everybody, I love this country and I love the American dream, and I love that we each have the freedom to pursue whatever that dream means to us. And, in many cases, it is starting your own business, pursuing your own livelihood, and as hard as you're willing to work, kind of defines your success in life. But, starting a business is challenging. Competing against competition is challenging. All of that is crazy. But people that start businesses in these industries, I think, are especially crazy. Because in many cases, one of your competitors is your own government, and that's kind of where you come in. And why I want to introduce all of our readership across, whether you're a cigar smoker or not. Here's what I believe is that, freedoms are not exclusive to your own personal tastes and preferences. So while you may hear about, fights for these freedoms that maybe don't personally involve you, each restriction of a freedom sets a precedent by which other freedoms can be restricted. And that's why I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about the cigar industry and some of the work that you do, and maybe some of the things that should be on our radar, just as American citizens, whether anybody smokes a cigar or not. We should have the freedom to do so should we choose. And the same goes with alcohol and firearms, and as we say, as part of our brand, these three things are anchored to the American dream and America freedom all the way to our founding. And wars have been fought and blood has been spilled over these things in a lot of cases. And I think it's important that as we all sit back in our comfy chairs, that we remain aware that these things are going on in the background, and that we have great people like yourselves and Glynn to be out there representing us.
I'm interested in Glenn's answers to those questions. I know one of them, but I've never. This is a really interesting podcast. I'm loving the start of it.
You're not the MC, Josh. Back off.
All right, Glynn, fire away.
This is good to know about you.
All right, Glynn. So here it is. So do you remember your first cigar?
La Gloria Cabana.
Okay. And where were you, and who were you with?
Made by Ernesto Carrello before he sold the company to General Cigar. I was at Frankie Roland's Steakhouse in downtown Roanoke, Virginia, and it was the very reason I got into the cigar lobbying, because one of our former governors proposed a smoking ban, first ever smoking ban in Virginia history. And I said, how dare our legislature tell me I can't smoke a cigar in a bar that welcomes me at the entrance to the most beautiful local steakhouse you could imagine. rivals anything in a major city, and they welcomed us as cigar smokers. And it was physically attached to the cigar shop, physically. So when they opened this bar, and you just walk in and you go, whether you're a smoker or not, you just walk into this place and you go, I should be smoking a cigar here.
Right.
And, you know, Sinatra's in the background, the dark red carpet, the dark mahogany bar. It just said, smoke a cigar. Walked into the cigar shop and I went into the humidor and I said, that's the band of a cigar smoker. Sight unseen, never tasted it before. I said, this is it. And when I first met Ernesto Carrello at a national trade show, I thought I was in the presence of royalty because of that very moment.
Right.
On the drinking part, it's a miracle I ever drank again because my first alcoholic beverage was an old Milwaukee beer at a local drive-in theater, and it's a miracle I ever drank again. But I proved myself wrong and drank a lot. I mean, you know, Jack Daniels got me through college successfully. It's kind of like that line from Christmas Vacation. How did you get through Christmas? Well, I had a lot of help from my friend Jack Daniels.
That's right.
And I'm shocked. Just like Josh, my first shot was black powder in Boy Scouts, probably somewhere between 13 and 15 years old.
Okay.
Black powder. And my father passed away some time back, and I got his entire gun collection. It's upstairs. I could put us on, you know, dark this out and go upstairs and start bringing down parts of the collection. But one of them's a black powder rifle, and it brought back a lot of memories. And then I look in it, and there's a black powder pistol, and then everything else. I need to start a small war.
Yeah. I love it. Well, it's a good transition.
And like you, I can tell you all that and can't tell you what I had for dinner last night.
Well, you know, it's funny how those things work. You know, it's you know, so you know, speaking of starting a war, you know, you're sometimes in the you know, the semi-war business. It feels like. You know, tell us, you know, essentially what you do. You know, for those. You know, that have never had to, you know, become educated on such things. Tell us what you guys do.
Josh, you want to kick it off?
You take this one first.
Well, I'm on the state front. You know, I monitor with Josh and with our team. Excuse me. I monitor what's going on in every state in the country on the cigar front, and you can't analyze that on the cigar front without looking at, as Josh mentioned, 30,000. It ranges between 20 and 30,000 bills introduced annually at the state level. Throw in the local governments and what happens in Congress, and you can double it. Because we get swept up into anything that has something to do with nicotine, anything to do with vape, e-cigarettes, cigarette taxation. So we have to track all things tobacco in order to chisel it down to the things that specifically, very specifically, impact the premium handmade cigar industry and pipe sector. And that's a lot, because those that are against our issues on the tobacco front don't know how to separate us out so that you don't adversely impact what is 0.5% of the total tobacco universe. So when state capitals want to attack cigarette taxation or taxation on vape and flavored tobacco products, all too often we get swept up into that type of legislation. We work for exemptions from that type of legislation. We work to kill that type of legislation. And then every now and then we get to turn around and support legislation, like bills that impose a tax cap on premium handmade cigars specifically, or allow cigar shops to carry on-premise or on and off-premise alcohol permitting for cigar shops, or the opening of cigar bars, or going for exemptions from smoking in bars to exemptions for specifically cigar bars. So it's all over the board, but it can range from preventing a state to allow local governments stronger regulatory and taxation powers than even that of the state, to legislation like just passed in Florida, where it allows local governments to regulate smoking on public parks and beaches, but specifically exempts premium handmade cigars and pipes. So the exemption game is one that we take very, very seriously, because we have proven, and we have now amassed a significant body of research that allows us to make the public health case that we are not every other tobacco product, that we don't have the adverse public health consequences associated with other tobacco products, or that we're such a small piece of the tobacco universe that we don't deserve a given level of taxation, that may be considered because they want to raise cigarette taxes. So it's quite literally all over the board. We have friendly state capitals. We have unfriendly state capitals. We have friendly and unfriendly allies in legislatures across the nation. Just like the alliances that Josh works to develop with the United States Congress and the United States Senate, we have our allies and we have our detractors. And the key is education. We spend a lot of time, both at the state and federal front, educating lawmakers as to why we are so unique, why we are so different.
Yeah.
And that message does not fall on deaf ears. Even with legislators, Josh and I have encountered legislators many, many times over the last several years where they start out as an adversary to our cause and end up saying, you know what, I get it. And when you present a mountain of evidence on the public health front or the demographic front that makes the case from very, very objective third-party research, they understand. And that's where, we come into play. And for the first time in the history of this industry, our political machine is never off. There's an old joke in Richmond, Virginia, that any hour of the day or night, a law firm is billing Philip Morris. And it's because their political machine is never off. Well, now ours, for the first time, is never off. We've got a presence in Washington, D.C. We make our presence felt in state capitals. We've built alliances and coalitions with our retail partners in every state in the country, to where we cannot dispatch lobbyists to represent us in every state or every region in the country. We're spending a tremendous amount of time teaching retail tobacconists how to be their own advocates. And we've got an amazing cadre of local retailers that are now just as comfortable giving testimony in a state capital as they are selling cigars. And I think that's a testimony to where the level of political sophistication has come in this industry. And I'll shut up now.
We've had to, develop those partnerships and mobilize and embolden retailers and consumers to get involved. And that's why, we are honored to be on the podcast, because we want to get in front of consumers, let them know about things like cigaraction.org, our website dedicated to informing consumers on some of the latest trends. Glynn has a lot of ground to cover on the states, with all 50 states, and sometimes the localities. There's very egregious things that transpire. On the federal side, as he mentioned, Congress is something that is in my purview, but also the Food and Drug Administration and the White House. And then more recently, we've started to get involved in some international issues. We voiced our opinion on a proposal in the European Union. The premium cigar market, we're the largest consumer of premium cigars in the United States. And we think that we need to carry our weight, and bad policy has no border. It's one where if something in the European Union or Australia or New Zealand pop up, the next thing that we know, it could be in our backyard. So being vigilant and sifting through, and we have good technology resources that help us do that, but it's daunting, and being able to rapidly respond and get involved quicker. We've taken the playbook of some other organizations out there, and even in the areas that you cover with the magazine, the NRA and the firearms groups and the alcohol policy groups. One of the consultants that we work with, he represents both craft spirits and premium cigars, because there is that connectiveness of, these are highly regulated adult products. So, how can we take best practices to grow our grassroots army, so to speak, that we can be competitive? We don't have the financial resources, being 0.01% of the overall tobacco market, like some of the other big guys or some of the other big industries like pharmaceuticals or defense. We have to be very nimble. We have to be very swift and leverage relationships and partnerships accordingly.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I do think, and this is the reason why I really wanted to bring you on, is I think it's easy for all of us, to not really focus on what's going on behind the scenes until the fight shows up at our doorstep, right? So, whether it's gun regulation or alcohol, which, you don't see as much of, these days at least, but certainly on the tobacco side, do you think there's certainly a clear fight and agenda against cigarettes, right? I think that's indisputable. Do you think cigars get lumped into that just out of laziness, that it's easier to just ban tobacco and nicotine? Or is there a clear agenda behind cigars?
I think there's a multitude of factors that are behind it. One of which is that the opposition is very well funded, very well organized, and their existence is to prohibit tobacco products. And if you look at a lot of pieces of legislation, a lot of regulations, it is cigarettes and other tobacco products.
Right.
And for us, it's that education piece, as Glenn mentioned, saying that, here are the differences between premium cigars and pipe tobacco. We represent age-verified venues. If you look at enforcement data, our members are not selling tobacco products in any statistically significant sense to underage folks or youth. So that's an important factor, in addition to the health arguments that Glenn asserted. So we also couple that with the small business side of things, that the retail sector employs over 30,000 people in the United States. If you add the secondary and tertiary, the box makers and the cellophane, on the cigar, the packaging, you're talking about over 200,000 employees in the United States. Not to even mention the Caribbean basin like Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic, the cigar producing countries. There is an interconnectedness, and that's where we go to government and say, hey, your regulation in the U.S., if you ban this product, or if you restrict it or make it undergo overly burdensome regulations that cost millions of dollars, you are going to affect the population and the people in the DR, in Honduras and Nicaragua, where you're going to have other issues where they will lose jobs. That will create immigration issues and migration issues. So that interconnectedness has been an argument that has really caught on in the past 2 or 3 years. And I think it's an important argument that has a lot of weight moving forward. But to directly answer your question, there's an incentive for policymakers that are anti-tobacco and anti-tobacco organizations to go after the whole and conflate the information, and that's where we come in to make those distinctions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember, there's been, as you said, countless bills that have come across in past years where, it's kind of rolled across my desk and I kind of raise an eyebrow like, wow, the end may be near. But, clearly you guys have been successful at, creating carve-outs and exceptions, to that general rule while the steamroller on cigarettes continues to move ahead.
And we're very fortunate, and you said it in your introduction, that we're fortunate to be in the United States where we have our system of government. It moves fast and slow at different points in time, and you have to be very calculated as a government affairs professional on what strategies and what techniques to deploy at certain points in the process. The process is messy, it's convoluted, it can be complex. But you look at the wins that have been achieved. It's on the legislative front, it's on the regulatory front, and also the courts. The courts have been a fail-safe, and I think that's where you see a lot of the connections with the firearm industry. Sometimes bad policy gets through a legislative branch, but there is the courts, which we've been able to successfully challenge the Food and Drug Administration 3 times. Recently had a victory. We're still waiting on what that remedy might be. They delayed when the briefs are due, but it was determined that the deeming regulation on premium cigars, the FDA, having that authority over it, that it was arbitrary and capricious. It violated the Administrative Procedures Act, and that's a big win. That telling the FDA that they were wrong in the process, that they didn't evaluate the data and the comments of the interest groups and the general public properly.
That's huge. That's unbelievable. So what are some of the big things that are on your radar now? What are some of the biggest threats that you see out there?
Glenn, you take that one first, and I'll back clean up.
Well, for the aren't you in California?
Unfortunately, man, that's it's offensive in California that I even hold this unlit thing indoors, and I would probably offend far more if I walked outside. And as there's plenty of local municipalities that just outright forbid it.
Well, that's the reason. That's the very reason I brought this up. Right now, one of the most pressing debates in the country is California has put a flavored tobacco ban referendum on the ballot in November the 8th. This is because the legislature kicked the can down the road, then it got thrown to the governor's office, then they throw it to a referendum. Now it's Prop 31. So we're hoping that Californians will defeat Prop 31, which will cost the state of California millions of dollars in taxes, hit a lot of premium as well as convenience store types of markets and small businesses throughout the state of California. We're working with a coalition to try to get the word out on it. I'm not going to joke. It's a daunting task. It's a daunting task because we really, at this juncture, don't know what role, quote unquote, big tobacco is going to play in trying to thwart the effort. But it means a lot. It could mean, up to 15 to 30% of a local cigar shop's annual revenue. And for a local small business, that's a lot of money. Not to mention the jobs, not to mention that, adults ought to be able to make adult decisions.
Right.
So the fact that they threw it, referendums are just a horrible political approach to decision making. And it shows the lack of authority that even resides in the legislature to make these types of decisions.
It's true. Not to mention they don't even play fair. At least in California, I know some states have bills that prohibit this. But I was going to jokingly ask, what is that proposition named on the ballot? Because
Prop 31.
And there's usually a descriptor after Prop 31. Is it like the School Safety Act or
flavored tobacco ban something? I'll have to get that would be a good article for y'all to post and to blog about and to help spread the word on. So we'll get you the specific narrative that's after the Prop 31.
But there's
I mean, a lot of states, and I'm sure you guys can speak to this, that they're getting, downright, I say it should be illegal. I mean, there's plenty of bills that are passed in California that are titled something completely unrelated to, the bill itself, so, there was a crime bill, passed a few years back that was called, I think it was Prop 47. It was easing, it was the Schools Improvement Act is what it was called. It was titled the Schools Improvement Act. And they were getting the funding, in the descriptor of the proposition on the ballot was they were going to ease prison overcrowding, which would save the state X billions of dollars, of which a percentage of that would go to the schools. But what the fine print of that bill really was discounting Class C felonies to ticket and release misdemeanors and releasing any nonviolent crime felon from prison early, regardless of his sentence. So it immediately released tens of thousands of felons on the street and then discounted any, nonviolent felony to a ticket and release misdemeanor. And immediately, but all of this had to do, but the point of that is just the labeling of some of these bills. Like, who wouldn't vote yes on the School Improvement Act, right?
Well, and you're absolutely spot on. I mean, that's when I said that the government can be very complex and it's hard to understand. An active issue right now that we're fighting, we have to fight every Congress at the federal level, is a tax increase on tobacco products, premium cigars, pipe tobacco, that for cheaper, heavier cigars is up to 1,000 or over 1,000% tax increase. Basically what it does is it doubles the cigarette tax and makes all tobacco products equal. And it was included last year and it was the biggest threat in the Build Back Better Act in the House Ways and Means version. We were able to get that stripped out in the House and defend it in the Senate. But that was an uphill battle. We had to send 30,000 letters to Congress from retailers, consumers, and manufacturers. But that has popped up again. We don't think it has a ton of traction, but the impetus of the bill is to support minority maternal health. And the pay for is the tobacco thing. And we said to the sponsor, the premise of the bill itself, we don't have any issue with. It's the fine print of the pay for. You got to think about the businesses and also minority-owned businesses that would be harmed if this were to go into effect. And, the flavor ban in California that Glynn referenced, I think August 2nd is leading up to be a really big day for the cigar industry and really in general. On August 2nd, there's a formality of a hearing in Sacramento on the California flavor referendum. There's also the deadline for the federal flavor ban, submitting comments to the FDA in their proposed flavor ban. And then also our brief is due in the court case that I referenced on the remedy for the FDA being found arbitrary capricious with the deeming regulation. So that day, a lot of stuff going on. In the midst of that, we had the tax effort that has popped up. We had 30 congressional meetings, our team this week alone.
Wow.
Trying to educate folks about, what's going on there. And then there's all these other issues in the background. We shed light on the most important ones. But, what would you say, Glenn? 400 bills of the 30,000 are somewhat relevant to, premium cigars?
What's amazing is we got to go from 30,000 to about 300 that we have to pay attention to. And that 300 is then chiseled down to about 20. that we really actively engage the retail and consumer community on. I'm talking about just in 2022. And
Wow.
And here it is. We just really are wrapping up the last of the state legislative season for this year, and within 60 days we'll be start confronting pre-filing for 2023.
Right.
And the pre-filing will probably, I could look into the political crystal ball today based upon what's happened in the last 5 years of state politics, and I can pretty well predict what's going to be pre-filed going into 23. You're going to see local authority legislation introduced in Kentucky, and now that it's passed in Tennessee with cigar bar and cigar shop exemptions, but because they're border states, they'll add some impetus to that. Flavored tobacco bans will be reintroduced in Maine and Colorado, and it almost got through in Colorado this year, and the bill died in the last literally 3 hours of their state legislative session. Excuse me. You can predict tax measures being introduced in Massachusetts, possibly Illinois. You can probably predict licensing legislation reintroduced in Virginia and Georgia. Tax increase reintroduced in Mississippi and West Virginia. That'll die quickly. But it becomes almost second nature. You can virtually predict what's going to be introduced in every single state. Then a few of them are curveballs that you don't anticipate. On the positive front, we know that the legislation for a tax cap and cigar bar legislation will be alive and well and introduced in the state of New York again, and that legislation's picking up positive momentum there.
Huh.
So, again, you can work yourself over. I keep a national map in front of me at my desk, and I sit there and say, all right, today's the Ohio day. And kind of discern where your priorities are and where you have to engage it with our constituency of thousands of cigar shops and millions of consumers to help pass the good stuff and kill the bad stuff.
Yeah. It's talk a little bit about why. I know the answer to this, but when I talk like this, a lot of people just say, you're pessimistic. But like flavored tobacco ban, it's a great example, right? Is that, not a single person I know smokes flavored tobacco, right? I mean, they just don't. So as a result, this doesn't hit their radar. They don't get concerned about it. They certainly don't write letters, on behalf of industry, expressing their displeasure over this pending regulation. But I believe all these things set a precedence, right? That they start one place, they start in the easy place, they get that through. That makes the next fight a little bit easier, and before you know it, there is a bill that directly impacts something that you're passionate about, but by then there's so much precedent set that if you choose to get into that fight at that moment, you've got a real fight on your hands. So
I agree with you completely. I mean, the opposition moves the goalpost. As soon as Tobacco 21 was passed, they were trying to get traction on Tobacco 27. So, that's a perfect example. With the flavor fight, we and PCA and our partners, Cigar Rights of America, we don't consider flavored cigars to be premium cigars, but we know that some of our retailers carry those products. And if it hurts the overall business of specialty tobacco retailing, that's why we're going to weigh in. We're going to challenge the rationale and the benefits, which they don't exist, for prohibiting a product. We are not in the business of prohibiting products that our membership sells. So, they're two very separate issues of flavor bans and premium cigars. But the vagueness of the rule itself, and I'm speaking of the federal rule, there's this term characterizing flavor. So the cigar you're holding cigar, your magazine or Cigar Aficionado or Half Wheel or any of the cigar media out there might say that cigar has notes of cocoa or chocolate or cinnamon. That speech could be prohibited based off of the most strictest interpretation of this rule. And we believe, and we're asserting in our comment, that is a chilling of free speech. That's the terminology that we're using, that the industry, manufacturers, retailers, and media such as yourself should be able to accurately describe the product for enjoyment and non-flavored cigars. They have these characterizing descriptors in it. Furthermore, there's a lot of folks that, like you and I, don't smoke flavored cigars, but there is a segment that will, enjoy occasionally a bourbon infused cigar. And the popularity of craft spirits with premium cigars, especially in the last 2 years, has really caught on. People that enjoy craft spirits and craft, handmade cigars, some people want to, combine them together occasionally. And that's something that we're weighing in on. So we don't want to see more and more of the market take a hit for no reason.
Well, and we don't know how far. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, just a quick point. I think even further, and this is why, I wanted to have you on and introduce you to the broader audience, even those that, may not partake in cigars yet. And I say yet because we're going to convert them all. But, if they're able to regulate premium cigars based on language and descriptors of this language, saying something described as like a cocoa aftertaste, for example, is a good example, right? That kids may find that appealing, I presume, is their argument, right? So therefore, we should strip that out or outright ban anything described as such. Well, like couldn't and shouldn't that argument equally be applied to alcohol?
Well, and that's the concern. If you look at, outside of the United States, in Europe, that's where it's headed. Like the regulation front, tobacco is extremely, extremely regulated, more so in Europe than in the United States because of our court system and their system of government. And I've had, conversations with our counterparts over there. They are at alcohol right now, and that regulation is starting to proliferate. But the next thing is caffeine, sugar. There is an agenda that this health agenda. Once you check off one box, the organization is not going to stop. They're not going to quit. And a lot of these are funded by Michael Bloomberg. As you know, is very anti-firearm, very anti, big gulp as his, history as mayor.
He's anti everything I love.
And anti-tobacco. So, you are even seeing in organizations that are anti-tobacco, they are getting involved in mission creep in these other areas that are parallel and very similar. So you're absolutely right. There's an interconnectedness of your audience and these other highly regulated adult, areas.
Let me ask you a question that, personally, even, I'm skeptical these days, but do individuals writing letters on your behalf, does that help you? Does that carry any kind of weight at all? Or
sure.
Is it just a waste of time? Because it feels like the individual voice doesn't matter anymore.
Personally, I think it does matter. I've been in too many congressional offices where there's a staff member at that front desk telephone keeping a spreadsheet on the yeas and nays on significant issues that calls are coming into the member's office on. And the true significance of it is, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, and you've been sitting there with me in those waiting rooms waiting on a staff meeting where they specifically ask, are you in the congressman's district? Are you in the legislator's district? And that's the magic. That's the secret sauce. is that, and that's the reason we have a zip code associated with every letter that we have sent in through our system, is that it goes into the specific legislator representing that specific constituent. And now you've got, House races and state legislative races being determined by 100 votes, by 200 votes. And the premium cigar community nationally is roughly 3 million individuals. Well, there's not a special interest group in the country that wouldn't give their right arm for 3 million constituents.
Right.
And you take our industry, which is so heavily headquartered in Pennsylvania and Florida. Well, the last I checked, there are two important states to being elected president of the United States. And that's a part of our coalition building exercise. But to go back to the foundation of your question, as I think it's equating specific constituents with their member to make a difference. And it helps us, because we can track this, and it helps us to be able to go into a member's office, whether it's in a state capitol or in Congress, and say, well, Congressman, delegate, representative, 7,912 of your constituents, feel this way on our issue. Well, 7,912 constituents can sway an election pretty bloody quickly in this political environment that we live in today. And that's where, again, I go back to our political sophistication level is just rising exponentially every day, every month, every year that this industry is under threat. I've said for a long time, the best thing to come out of the regulatory process, it has forced us to research ourselves. Right. And now we have amassed a tremendous amount of research at a tremendous cost to this industry. Plus, we've amassed research done by the government that they probably didn't want us to have, that documents that were not a threat to public health, that were not a threat to children, that were not selling to kids under the age of 18. The research is there that's been both established by the industry and the government to make the case for us. And again, educating the consumer, the public, and the political community as to what that means is going to better protect this industry.
And that research is incredibly important, but you have to humanize the issue too. And that's where the power of the voter and the constituent comes in. It's a lot easier entering a congressional office or a state legislative office from a position of strength, saying, we have 30 small businesses in your district and we have 3,000 constituents that are passionate about this issue enough to write a letter. A lot of these are form written, and I understand the argument that some people feel disenfranchised and they don't feel as though that their voice is being heard. We have to change that because at the end of the day, I've seen it happen on the other side where, the anti-tobacco groups are able to get, 100,000 comments sent on an issue. And then the FDA cites that, saying that the overwhelming majority of comments that were submitted is the rationale that they're taking. So, it's offense and defense. We want to ensure that the comments are rooted in fact and there's quality to them, but we also have to diversify the voices. So, and how I mean that is having consumers, retailers, manufacturers, the three parts of that triangle. We are going to be successful when we have those three united, pushing forth a message. Our job is really to tee up the legislative process and inform people. But if things are going to get done, and this goes for positive and negative, if we're getting things done positively, it's because we're getting the support from retailers, consumers, and manufacturers. If we're not getting that support, we might be able to stave off some stuff or delay or push it to the courts. But a lot of the defeats that we see, and there really hasn't been all of that many for premium cigars in the 10, 12 years that Glynn has been working with within the industry. We've taken a few on the chin, but I think that it's because of a lack of participation. I would look at a lot of those. If we get increased participation and we can drive our numbers to the level that these anti-groups are doing, our challenge is we have to do it with a lot less resources.
Yeah.
But, we have to play in that field.
Well, I think that, I mean, the reason why I was so passionate about doing this, and again, we don't want to turn it into a political publication, but, that said, I think as part of an American lifestyle publication and celebrating freedom, when any freedom is under attack, to me, it's attacking all freedom, because they're not going to stop there, and I think to me, the big reminder to our audience as a whole is simply that I don't think most reasonable Americans would dispute some of the specific agenda items they claim to be trying to address, right? Like, within firearms, nobody wants mass shootings. Of course not. Like, that's ridiculous. There isn't a single firearm owner I can imagine who says, yes, I think that's a good thing. Go for it. In the same way as marketing tobacco to children, I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think any, tobacco smoker would say, yes, I believe you should, wrap that up like it's a toy and sell it in a toy store, and get them hooked on nicotine at 9 years old, right? So I think that, for our audience, what I always try to remind people when I'm having this discussion is what they're proposing the solution to what they're trying to prevent? So, if you're trying to prevent minors from enjoying flavored tobacco, is the solution outlawing flavored tobacco for everybody? Like,
No.
are you trying to tell me you have no other means or mechanism of enforcing a law other than the outright abolition of the product you're trying to prevent getting into the hands of the minority of the universe that you claim is causing the problem, and especially that's amplified within the firearms community of if 0.1% is causing the problem, your solution is an outright ban of everybody, even though 99.9999% of people are law-abiding, responsible people with that particular product or whatever it happens to be. Your solution is to protect me from myself so that these few troublemakers supposedly can't get their hands on it? That seems reasonable?
It's lazy and bad policy. I mean, you look at it with the flavor fight. It's you have an objective that doesn't match the solution. The solution. So there are existing mechanisms to prevent youth from purchasing these products. You have to be 21, and this is something that Congress passed. And it's funny because an outright flavor ban was debated by Congress and ultimately objected. So they have to use regulatory creep in order to achieve this.
But see, that's my point and reminder, is that I think that we become numb to this without stepping back and really thinking at the context of the big picture, right? Is, the simple question for me is always, as an adult, as a grown American, do you feel you need the government to protect you from things?
Let's put this in context. The FDA has done over a million compliance inspections on the retail community in this country since it had regulatory power in 2009. Well over a million. Think about that. There's been approximately a 94.6% compliance rate with those over a million spot inspections of retail community, and that includes cigarettes, for God's sake.
Right.
That I watch these offenses that are posted, and the convenience store community, even with the vast number that they get cited on, it's still a little over 94% compliance rate at the retail community level.
Right.
That being said, the National Association of Tobacco Outlets has touted a study that was done by, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a school administrators type of association. And so it was a total non-tobacco oriented study.
Right.
And that study clearly substantiated that the vast number of underage youth that are getting their hands on tobacco is coming through social sources. Uncle Bob bought it for me.
Right.
The guy I gave $20 to outside the convenience store got it for me.
Right.
It came through non-retail channels to the youth. It's not our fault. That's what I'm saying. It's not our, and it bloody well isn't our fault at the premium cigar shop level, where you're talking about a fraction of a fraction of a fraction to try to find a non-compliant single citation.
And one of the things that we've been working on recently, even though it is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, we're putting self-policing mechanisms into our own industry and saying these are best practices. This is retail standards of how a business should operate, educating folks. We at the trade show, we were giving out the age verification stickers for the register and for the signs that are outside of the shop and lounge. So, we're making a concerted effort on that front because we know that that's allegedly their top priority. But, our message is to the FDA, enforce the existing rules that are in place that were duly passed by Congress, and don't overextend yourself into areas where there isn't a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, simply put, I mean, the solution to the solution isn't more laws, right? You already have laws regulating these things and preventing the things that you're trying to prevent. Put your time and focus on better enforcement of the existing regulations. Don't create more. So I think that, my goal certainly is to bring awareness to this issue because, we have a sizable audience, and the overall community in these three areas is a massive group of Americans that hopefully, I think are, they have a good appetite for a fight once in a while. They believe in freedom in America, and they just don't really believe that the fight's at their doorstep yet, because maybe, they're not attacking the one thing that they love, for example. But I think my point behind having you guys on is to just bring, both specific to our cigar industry that we love, but also a general awareness that each of these fights actually do impact you, whether you realize it or not. And if we could all band together and show that, each time, a state or a local municipality or certainly the federal government tries to step in and do one of these things, that they're met with, a very loud, vocal opposing force, backing you guys up. That, hopefully over time, and enough of those, your job starts getting a little bit easier. See, I'm trying to be an optimist.
Absolutely. Well, we would encourage your listeners, and kind of the parting words would be, visit cigaraction.org, premiumcigars.org, and fightflavorbans.org. The premiumcigars.org is our main website. A lot of information, a lot of statistics and research. Cigaraction.org, you can sign up for free to receive our email alerts. And as Glynn mentioned with the zip code there, we will send you stuff that's tailored to your state or your locality, in addition to the federal stuff. So we're not going to over inundate people. Most folks will get 3 or 4 emails from us a year. of the utmost important things that affect their communities, affect their states, and then overall cigars. And then, before August 2nd, visit fightflavorbands.org and get your comments out there. I'm sure that we'll have another site ready to go for the referendum after we get through this federal area in California, and we're happy to keep you up to date on everything as they transpire, as it transpires.
No, it's amazing, and I really just have to encourage our readers and listeners to get involved, man. Like, you see this stuff going on, and I hear all of you talk like, I can't even watch the news anymore. Like, it drives me crazy, this and that. But, guys like Josh and Glynn, I mean, they're out there fighting for you. I mean, this is their passion. This is their life. And, they need a force multiplier. They need some help. And honestly, like, you guys have made it so damn easy. It's ridiculous, right? You don't have to be Hemingway and craft some amazing letter from scratch. I mean, you've created the damn letter. If you type your name, it auto-fills everything, for Christ's sake. Like, you hit submit, it sends it to them. Like, seriously, people, like, I mean, pour a drink, light up a freaking cigar, and, just sit there and fill out forms for these guys and freaking help them out. Give them some ammunition in their belt, for Christ's sake. I mean, you're out there, fighting with bows and arrows against an army, for Christ's sake. Like, help these guys out a little bit. And as always, we're about that American freedom. We're about celebrating it and certainly defending it as well. Foreign and domestic was the motto. And unfortunately, sometimes that is a domestic fight, and I encourage everybody to get going. Also for your retailers out there at PCA, a lot of them we met recently, and they loved what we were doing and everything. So we did put together, kind of a special thing to help them just at our cost. If they want to promote the publication and put it in their shops for their customers, we give it to them at our cost, and they can reach out to us directly and get that to get the word out there, get their own customers involved in the fight as well. We're going to post this podcast, and also I think in the upcoming issue we're going to have an article from you, Josh, on behalf of PCA about how people can get more involved and some of the things that are looming out there. And I hope that that's a regular voice in our pages, and that we do this again, several times, just to keep it at the forefront of people's attention, because what you guys are fighting for, you're a small army, but you're really moving the needle on our behalf. I'm grateful, that you guys do what you do, that you guys, chose to do what you did. You could have just, college drinking old Milwaukee. Instead, you decided to graduate and get out here and get in the fight. So, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for what you guys do on our behalf. So, anything that we can do to help in that, and hopefully anything that our audience can do to help you guys, please continue to come on and come back and let us know what we can do to be a force multiplier for you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us on. We appreciate it. And when you're in DC ever, please come by and have a smoke with us.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Absolutely.
And it's perfectly legal in the office.
Well, then maybe we need to relocate the headquarters to Washington. Just
keep this in mind, and it goes back full circle to where this conversation began. If you don't believe that they'll come after cigars and alcohol, you're sadly mistaken. And if you don't believe they're going to come after caffeine and cheeseburgers, you're sadly mistaken, because they are next. They are next. And the nanny state is very alive, very well financed, very well organized. And it just means that all the basic enjoyments of life are consistently under threat. It's like what George Burns said, I give up all your vices to live 3 more years in the geriatric ward.
No, thanks. All right, gentlemen. Well, listen, I'm grateful for all you do, and thank you very much for sharing time and information with us. And we look forward to having you guys on again. But keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.